Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. As I've been commenting regularly at the mealtime and other occasions, talking with the community and with visitors, with residents here, referred to these beautiful spring days, clear blue skies and flowers all blooming in the gardens and blossom on the trees, and kind of the paradisical quality of spring in England. And this is one aspect, very noticeable and impactful, delightful for many, many people. But when I say those words, I noticed in my mind the thought, it's not wise to make too much of beautiful spring days. If we invest in those as being what's right and good and of value, then when it's grey and windy and cold and the same heavenly qualities are not present, then the mind labels it as bad and wrong and unfortunate. Oh, won't it be nice when this is over we can have some beautiful, bright, sunny days again. So it's natural for us to enjoy the beauties, delights of the world, the weather in this part of the world, in this time of the year when the sun is shining and so forth. It's a natural delight and a natural enjoyment. The country's even famous for it. You know, the reputation of spring in England is something that is appreciated many places. But it's not the end of suffering. It's not a refuge. It's not something that can, in and of itself, liberate. The tendency of the citta, the heart, to invest in those positive attributes, it is unconsciously, out of ignorance, setting itself up for disappointment or for the quality of heartbreak or disillusionment, disappointment. The process often goes on quite unconsciously, and in ordinary everyday conversations, it's something that gets referred to. Oh, shame, the weather was nice last week. Shame about today, but it looks like it's going to clear up. And these kind of things are very common, very ordinary, very natural for us. But the presence of blossoming flowers, or the presence of the sun shining in a blue sky, that's not something that is intrinsically liberating or freeing, that can genuinely bring happiness, can bring freedom, can bring enjoyment. It can bring pleasure, but it can't bring the joy of liberation, of complete freedom and peacefulness. Actually, speaking of spring flowers, I was noticing, sitting there on my seat this evening, many of the flowers that are on the shrine were put together and used as special offerings on the occasion of saying farewell to Ajahn Amaro as he was going off to Japan. Last Sunday we had a special occasion to express gratitude and well-wishing for him. But if you're sitting up close to the shrine, there's a certain pungency in the flowers. They've been there for nearly a week, and so they're beginning to get a bit stinky. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the that's the nature of flowers. Is they blossom and they're bright and they're beautiful for a time, and then the organic nature of the flowers is that they decay and they start to rot and become. They lose their delightful fragrance, and they turn into a different form. That smells kind of a bit rotten to our noses. So this is an aspect of the teaching that Luang Por Chah would point to over and over again. And some of the morning readings that we've had in the last few weeks, this is the kind of thing that Luang Por Chah refers to very, very regularly. Say, for example, when he said people who are attached to youth and never want to grow old, they should only eat unripe green mangoes. They should refrain from eating ripe fruit. If they don't like the old mangoes, they shouldn't eat them. They should only eat the unripe green ones. But that's natural. Again, ordinary for us as human beings. We get attached to the signs of youth and beauty, like the fresh flowers and the blossoming and the fragrance that comes in at their kind of peak moment. That's what we love. And then there can be a disappointment or that doesn't smell very nice, or the flowers have gone over, a kind of sadness or a grief, a sense of loss. But if we're wise, we know that within the living process, there's the rising and the falling, there's the ripening, and then there's the decaying. But so much of our life and our attention, our conditioning, our education, the family, the pressures and values of the family and the society kind of push us to praise the arising, the springtime, the qualities of success, beauty, victory, and then failure, the decay, ugliness, loss, defeat. It's even saying the words out loud, you kind of start to feel more depressed. This morning I was mentioning the fact that when I was a teenager, when I used to do hurdles. I was a sprint hurdler, and I was quite successful. So for those of you who are not familiar, there's in the kind of junior levels or the school levels of this sprint hurdles, you have three layers. So the 80-meter hurdles is the junior, 100-meter hurdles is the intermediate, 110 meters is the adult or the 18-year-olds. So that's what they have for the men on the like Olympic level. Sprint hurdles is 110 meters. So because I got short, thick legs, I was quite good over the junior and intermediate. I never really tried the senior hurdles. They were way kind of bigger than my capacity. But as it was, I was quite quick and quite successful. And so I won the races at my school, and I was put into the local championships, and I won those for the Maidstone and District championships, and I won that. And then I went into the Kent County championships, and I won that as a junior over the 80-meter hurdles. So I thought I was pretty hot stuff. But at the national level, they didn't have the 80-meter hurdles for juniors. They only started at the 100 meters. So I didn't go to the national competition that time. But the next year, I won again, and then when I went up to the intermediate level again, I won the district level and then the county level, and then I got to compete at the nationals. So I got a big flash across the back of my tracksuit saying Kent, and this is a major credentials in high school. If you get the county name on the back of your tracksuit, you can really kind of have a bit of swagger around the place and pretend that you've forgotten that it's there, and you're impressing everybody else in the school. So I was pretty pleased with that, and pretty proud of myself. Thought I was quite hot stuff. And then I went to the nationals, and not to bore you, to cut a long story short, I was left in the dust in the first heat. It's like, the first of the races, as because there's people competing from all over the United Kingdom. I was not very hot stuff at all. I was sort of second to last in my heat, and so I was 14 years old, and so that was a deflation. But I didn't really reflect on it very deeply at the time. I was just sort of embarrassed that I got beaten so thoroughly and didn't even make it past the first heat. So that was an experience of investing in the pleasure of winning and having the kind of signs of superiority, literally on your back, walking around with a big sign on your back saying, "I'm someone special." And then, I'm not special at all. It's a very, very, very ordinary, very, very average. I think I'm just mentioning this as an example. I'm not trying to boast about how good I was at hurdles. I haven't run a race in more than 50 years. And I wouldn't be very good now, I'm sure. But I think most people, you can translate this kind of thing into your own lives in various different forms, in the family life, in the work life, in your education, even in meditation. That sometimes people get focused on being the champion meditator on a retreat. They can sit straighter and sit longer than everybody else, and they think you think you're really something special. And then the Ajahn says it doesn't really matter how long you sit or how straight your posture might be. What matters is your attitude, and so that could be a moment of deflation. So this is important to notice, because these things can stay with us. We can feel loss or regret, something that we failed at, something that we broke or we were responsible for, that we had lots of investment in, and then it falls apart. We didn't qualify, we didn't get our degree, or we had a relationship, a marriage that fell apart, or we engaged in some business venture and it all fell to pieces. We had a friendship that went sour and broke. So these kind of dynamics are present in most people's lives in one way, shape, or form. So I feel it's good to look at that and to see how even 10, 20, 30 years later, I'm 69 now, so when I was competing in those races, it was more like 55 years ago, long time ago. But still I can remember that, oh, wow, second to last, this is terrible. So if we're not wise, we can dwell on those things that are broken, those losses, those griefs of our childhood, our adolescence, our early adulthood, later, when we're adults, and they can stick with us like a burden, a stress upon the heart. The other day, I was with some of the other monks. I was talking about how another random example. When I was at high school, I was very, very invested in getting to Oxford University. This was the pinnacle of my life. I fantasized myself having a string of degrees after my name, and literally I would sort of imagine my name with M.A. Oxon afterwards, and so it was so important and such a big thing, and I was so keen to get there. And I did the Oxford Oxford and Cambridge entrance exams, and I got an interview. I got through the exams and got an interview at University College, Oxford, to do philosophy, psychology, and physiology. PPP was the name of the degree I was applying for. But it was so important, and it was so everything in my life depended on this, and I was so keen to get everything right that I was in a state of great tension, great anxiety. And when I had the interview, sitting in a room in this Oxford College, University College, study, and there was a physiologist, a psychologist, and a philosopher, and they were almost like, with great respect, they looked like caricatures of their own particular roles. So the physiologist looked very sort of like a laboratory scientist with very kind of narrow features and clean shaven. The psychologist had a long brown beard and round wire-in spectacles, and long hair. And then the philosopher had this kind of shock of dark black hair and a kind of slightly straggly beard. So anyway, I had this is the moment when everything hinges on me making a good impression and getting all the answers right. And at a certain moment, when it came to the philosopher to speak to me, and I already hadn't done very well with the first two because I hadn't bothered with doing any of the preparatory reading, where I'd sort of opened a psychology book that I've been encouraged to look at, but it hadn't. I've been basically too lazy to do much preparation, so I couldn't really talk about what psychologists I was interested in or what they said or what they had done. So that wasn't very good. Then the philosopher said, El Greco painted people with very sort of long oval faces. Do you think he had astigmatism? I went, why is he asking me an art history question? Why should I know about El Greco and his eye problems? And he kind of looked at me and I was like a rabbit in the headlights. And I didn't realize that he was asking me because it was a logic puzzle rather than an art history puzzle. And I froze. I was just, usually I'm quite verbal, as most people are aware, never short of words. And but my mind went completely blank. I was sort of frozen. And then he had to walk me through it bit by bit. It took a while to realize he was a philosopher, so he was asking me whether I understood the logical background to this. And so he, bit by bit, he walked me through it. So, okay, if El Greco had an eye problem, then and he saw people's faces as long and thin, then when he drew a circle on a piece of paper or on a canvas, then that would look long and thin. So he probably, if you can follow the logic, that therefore what he was putting on the canvas would actually match the shape of people's faces, because if his eyes were distorting their faces, his eyes would distort the shape on the canvas in the same way. Therefore, the conclusion was that El Greco probably did not have astigmatism. It took about 10 minutes, 10 agonizing minutes that felt like about 4 days. Well, I'm exaggerating. But it felt very, very long and painful. He finally got to the end and you could feel him going, this bloke's an idiot. I was only 17 at the time, my excuse. And but it was that reason why I mentioned it. It was that idea of going to Oxford University was so important, so special, and everything I built up in my mind. So I've got to do this. I've got to succeed. This is the only thing that matters. And then that interview did not go very well. And then shortly afterwards, I got an envelope with a very small slip of paper in it saying, you have not been accepted for University College, Oxford. Please do not question this decision. And this decision is final. Do not contact us. A1. The appropriate sign-off. It wasn't even a full-size piece of paper. It was just like a little slip, like, and don't contact us. So that was another great heartbreak. The world ended. That was that kind of painful. As it turned out, I got an offer from London University, went there instead, and that worked out very, very, very well. But for a long time, that was just this. The sadness, the grief of not getting what I wanted, of having built up that idea of going to that particular university it was loaded, just charged with meaning and value that the mind had given it. And at that age and at that time was completely unconscious of how much that was fed by my own attitude and how it didn't have to be that way. If we notice the degree to which we're investing in springtime or the fresh flowers or success and praise and good fortune and comfort and getting what we like, if we don't notice that, then we set ourselves up for those kind of griefs over and over again. It's one loss, one disappointment, one painful experience after another. And then the way we generally cope with that, as it says in the Four Noble Truths we just recited this evening, that the way we get away from that painful feeling is ever seeking fresh delight. Tatra tatra binandini, ever seeking fresh delight, now here, now there, as the Buddha describes the way that craving, that tanha works. We get away from dukkha by chasing after the next exciting, interesting, pleasant thing, the next promising possibility. So, the encouragement, and again, I hope these are just random examples from my own life that came up in conversation in the last week or two, so I just mentioned them in that. But please do translate these into the field of your own life, your own childhood, your own education, your own work life, your own relationships, your own time in the monastery. Fill in the gaps for yourselves. So the encouragement is to use the Buddha's teaching on this and to recognize that gratification, that's the delight of a beautiful spring day or the lovely flowers or the success, winning the race, that is asada, gratification, asada. But its partner is adinava, which is the liability or the downside. And you don't get the gratification without the liability, without the danger, without the downside. Asada and adinava, they're a pair. They go together. Or like the two sides of the same coin, as Luang Por Amaro would put it. You can't just pick up a coin and only get the heads and not the tails. You get both together. So that the asada is gratification, that kind of pleasure, that sweetness of, yes, I got what I wanted. Success, pleasure, youth, beauty, happiness, comfort, good meditation. And the adinava is the downside, that the shadow. But they go together. They're all part of the natural order. So one of the key teachings that we have that speaks of this in the middle-length discourses, the Majjhima Nikaya, there's a sutta called the 5 and the 3, the Panchataya Sutta, the 5 and the 3. And in that, at the end of the sutta, the Buddha points out, he says, what we need to do in order to fulfill the spiritual potential that is here, if we wish to guide this life towards freedom and ease and peacefulness, then we should contemplate the 6 senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. Contemplate the activity of the 6 senses, the field of experience. Contemplate that, and to notice the gratifications, beautiful things to see, beautiful things to listen to, delicious tastes, lovely fragrances, beautiful physical sensations, delightful ideas, beautiful mind states. To know the 6 senses, to know the gratification, that the senses are rigged to produce pleasant feelings, but they're also rigged to produce painful feelings. You get the other. So to know the origin and the disappearance, the arising of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and the fading of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch and thought. To know how they work, the 6 senses operate, and to notice the gratification and to notice the liability, the danger, the downside. And the result then of contemplating the 6 senses in this way, to see how what we see, what we think, what we see, what we smell, taste, and touch. They're in a constant state of arising and ceasing, of flowing into form and dissolving, arising and passing, the gratification and the danger, and then the escape. That's the last part of it, the nisarana, the gratification, the danger, and the escape with respect to these 6 senses. And the escape is essentially knowing the arising and passing, knowing the gratification and the danger. It's a very clear and direct relationship. The more that the heart fully knows the arising and passing, and it knows the sweetness of gratification and the bitterness of the liability, the adinava, then that is what leads directly to the escape, the fire exit, the freedom of the heart from being bound by those limitations, by the hope for something pleasant or the fear of something painful, and so on and so forth. So that that is really the essence of meditation training in terms of the development of wisdom, is strengthening the heart, the ways of training the heart to know those processes, the field of the sense activity, to know that and to see how it arises and passes away. And through that clear and unbiased knowing, and not just having an idea about it, or you hear the words I'm saying, or you read it in the Majjhima Nikaya, and you say, okay, now I understand. But it's not just hearing the words and comprehending what the words mean, but really taking it to heart, so that when we hear something beautiful or we hear something ugly, then we know, oh, that's a sound being perceived. It arises, it passes away. When we taste a delicious flavor or a disgusting flavor, oh, it's a sense of taste arising, passing away. When we apply those principles moment by moment, that's what leads to the nisarana, the escape, the experience of freedom. Another of the significant teachings of the Buddha is, this is full moon of May, or the first of the 2 full moons of May this year. So this is not Visakha Puja in the Thai calendar; it is Visakha Puja in the Sri Lankan calendar. But so one of the events that Visakha Puja celebrates and recollects is the birth of the Bodhisattva, the Buddha's birth in Lumbini, in what is now Nepal. And the other 2 things that are celebrated, they all took place on the full moon day of May in different years of the Buddha's life. Was the birth, and then the enlightenment at Bodh Gaya, and then the final passing away, the parinibbana that took place at Kusinara. So the Buddha's birth was accompanied by quite a large number of miraculous and colourful sort of aspects or events or qualities around his birth. It was so strange and mysterious, wonderful and marvellous, as it says in the suttas. And again, it's another sutta in the middle-length discourses in the Majjhima Nikaya. And this is one that Luang Por Sumedho particularly marked up in his own copy of the Majjhima. Because the scenario, and I've quoted this many times, and probably many of you are familiar with it, but it's a very, very significant teaching, I would say, because it starts off with Venerable Ananda gathered together with a group of other Sangha members in a hall in the monastery, and Venerable Ananda is recounting to the group some of these miraculous, amazing, strange qualities of the birth of the Bodhisattva. And he describes how when his mother was pregnant, she didn't experience any kind of discomfort. She became naturally virtuous, and her body was quite at ease during the time of the pregnancy. And then that was something wonderful and marvelous, notable, miraculous. And then when the Bodhisattva was born, he was born with his mother standing up, holding onto the branch of a tree in the forest of Lumbini. And then when he was born, the baby was caught by devas. The devas who received the baby as he was born. This was another wonderful and marvelous quality of the Bodhisattva. And then with the devas holding the baby, seemingly in midair, then streams of cool and warm water appeared from the air and washed the baby that was newly born. And again, Venerable Ananda says, this is another wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata, of the Blessed One. And then as soon as the baby was born and then was set down onto the ground, then he started walking. And with each step, a lotus blossom popped up from the ground under the feet of the newly born Bodhisattva. Again, another wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. And then at the end of 7 steps, the baby raised his hand into the air and said, "I am the leader in the world, I am the foremost in the world." So again, this is a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. So not only walking and talking as soon as he was born, but also with lotus flowers popping up under his feet. So at this point in the scenario, when the Lord Buddha arrives at the hall, and as occurs in many of these situations, he says that everyone, all the monks go quiet, and when the master has arrived, and then the master says, "So what was it you were talking about? What was the conversation that I interrupted when I got here?" And then Venerable Ananda, having a perfect recall, recited exactly what he said to the other Sangha members there, and was saying, these are wonderful and marvelous qualities of the Tathagata, how he was born, how he walked and talked, and so on and so forth. And then after he finishes that account, then the master, the Buddha, says to the group, "Would you like to hear of another wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata?" And it's a kind of Pali humor. You can almost sort of think, "Oh wow, now we're going to get something really interesting." Yeah, that was all colourful and amazing enough. Now the master's going to tell us something even more incredible and spectacular. And so you can always feel them sort of leaning forward. Well, this is going to be good. And then what the Buddha says is, when a sensation, a feeling, a Vedana arises in the mind of the Tathagata, he knows this is a feeling arising. As a Vedana, as a sensation abides in the mind of the Tathagata, he knows this feeling is abiding in the mind. When a feeling fades in the mind of the Tathagata, he knows this is a feeling fading. This too is a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. And then so too with perception, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. So too with a thought. When a thought arises in the mind of the Tathagata, he knows this is the thought arising, this is a thought abiding, this is a thought fading away. This too is a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata, and so you should remember it. So again, as it's sort of subtle Pali humor, so the master recognizing the overexcited qualities that Ananda sometimes has, and sort of cooling him down, saying, often they have not so Ananda, or he gives Ananda a different angle on things, and where Ananda tends to get a bit over-enthusiastic, overexcited, and charged up, then the Buddha very regularly takes hold of what Ananda has said and then puts a different angle on it. And this is one of the most wonderful and marvelous occasions when he does that. This is because it's really describing, again, this is the essence of vipassana meditation. And also that this is actually more important than walking and talking as soon as you're born and lotus blossoms popping up under your feet. The real miracle is that we can watch our minds. That's the useful and amazing miracle. Having been born with your mother standing up, or being able to walk and talk as soon as you're born. Well, it's colourful, it's interesting, it's unique, but really, that doesn't help. us in an ongoing way. But the capacity to watch the mind, the capacity to know our thoughts and feelings, that's the true miracle. That is something that is here and now, a blessing, something that is powerful, effective, real in our minds. Again, we can hear the words and we can say, and it can make sense. Yeah, that sounds great. That's true. Yes, that's it. But again, like Luang Por Chah would often say, medicine, it might be the right medicine, it might be the thing that you need for your illness, but if it sits in a bottle on the shelf, it doesn't help you. And Luang Por Sumedho would use the same example very regularly. So yes, we've got the medicine and we've got the ailment, but we need to take the medicine to help the illness, the ailment, to be cured. So it's a question of taking this teaching, these principles, and applying it, making it real, using it moment by moment. So the maybe a third scriptural teaching that I feel is very relevant in exactly this area, again, that gets quoted quite often, is it's a kind of it's related to dependent origination cycle, which describes the way that noble truth number two, the cause of suffering, leads to suffering. How you get from noble truth 2 to noble truth 1. How the cause of suffering leads to dukkha. It's really, this is the way that truth number 4 leads to truth number 3. How the path, or the application of the Eightfold Path, leads to dukkha nirodha, leads to the ending of suffering. So if that's not too complicated for people. So it's a teaching where the Buddha's describing how to relate skillfully to perception and feeling. And this is in the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses in the Book of the Tens. And it's like dependent origination, it's a stage-by-stage process. And it describes how things begin. The root of experience is in interest. We get interested in a thought, in a memory. Interested, the attention is, I say, drawn to a particular feeling, a particular memory, an idea, a sight, a sound, a smell, a taste, a sensation. So rooted in interest, and then born of attention. So the interest, the mind turns towards an object and then locks onto it. It pays attention, like paying money, paying your fare. Like you get on the bus, you pay your fare, you pay attention. You're giving something to the present experience. You're giving it your attention. So starts off with interest, and then turning to that object and giving it attention. And then develops into a contact, passa. So the mind becomes focused on that thing that we're seeing, that thing that we're hearing, that thing that we're tasting or smelling, that thing that we're remembering or imagining, or the emotion of love or hate or grief or anger, fear, desire, delight, whatever it might be. That the contact, sense contact, passa, is the locking on to that particular pattern of sensory experience in the realm of emotion or thought, memory, or in sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, wherever it might be. So interest, attention, then contact, and then from that contact arises feeling, vedana, sensation. So pleasant feeling, painful feeling, neutral feeling, whatever the object the mind is locking onto, whether it's winning a race, whether it's eating some food, whether it's listening to a Dhamma talk, whether it's cleaning your teeth, whatever it might be that's going on. So there's feeling, sensation, vedana. And so in the pattern of dependent origination that we often recite, then feeling, vedana, conditions tanha, Vedana Pachaya Tanha. Just as we recited the qualities of Tanha in the Four Noble Truths in the sutta that we chanted this evening. So if there's ignorance, if things start off with ignorance, if the mind is not seeing clearly, then feeling conditions craving. Vedana conditions tanha. But that's not the only possibility. It's not the fact that every feeling will lead to suffering. That's not the case. And sometimes people misunderstand the teaching and assume that that a painful feeling will lead to more suffering, or a pleasant feeling will lead to suffering. Only if it's handled with ignorance, if it's held, if the attitude towards it is clouded by not seeing clearly, by ignorance, by avijja. If there's no avijja in the system, then if the mind is awake, aware, then there's still interest, attention, and contact and feeling, but it doesn't lead automatically towards dukkha, towards suffering. There's a change, there's a kind of a different pattern. And so this particular sutta is very, very helpful, and it highlights that change. So it says, okay, rooted in interest, born of attention, arising from contact, and then diverging into feelings, pleasant, painful, neutral feelings. Then, if there isn't ignorance and the mind is seeing clearly, then that feeling is headed by or governed by concentration. So you're paying attention. You're not. The mind is not scattered. You're noticing. Oh, this is a feeling of excitement, or this is a feeling of sweetness. This is a feeling of disappointment. This is a feeling of self-criticism. That's what this is. So there's concentration, samadhi, headed by concentration, dominated by mindfulness, and surmounted by wisdom. So that process, concentration, mindfulness, wisdom, samadhi, sati, panya, they come into play at this point. So it doesn't matter how strong the feelings are. They can be very, very delightful and intoxicating, very blissful. They can be quite neutral, very plain and ordinary. They can be extremely painful, like a horrible memory or a damage to your body. You've got an illness or an ache. The process of applying concentration, mindfulness, and wisdom then allows us to say, "Oh, this is oh dear, I really could have done better with that. I'm actually a useless person, aren't I?" Feeling. That's what that judgment is. It's just a judgment. Or "Oh, I'm really something, I'm so special, I'm probably the champion monk in this monastery." Feeling. That if there's enough concentration, mindfulness, and wisdom, then whether it's painful, pleasant, neutral, then the mind, the citta, holds it with clarity. It knows it with clarity, without any kind of bias or confusion. So then, in that process, if that feeling is headed by concentration, dominated by mindfulness, surmounted by wisdom, then in that sutta it says that that will lead to that experience. It yields deliverance as its essence. So that knowing that feeling with clarity, with a lack of bias, without confusion, that leads to deliverance, vimutti, and that freeing of the heart from its habitual unnecessary boundaries. It frees the heart from its false limitations. It yields deliverance as its essence, and that leads to the deathless, to the amata, or leads you to the internal Amaravati, the internal place of the deathless realm. It merges in the deathless. Amato gada is the Pali for that. That all things merge with the deathless, amato gada, and terminate in nibbana. The result of that whole process, that 10-factored sequence, is terminating in Nibbana, the end result of holding love, hate, fear, desire, comfort, discomfort, gain and loss, success, failure, pleasure, pain, is Nibbana, is peacefulness, is coolness of heart. So these are teachings that are often quoted, and we can think of them. They're in the language of the suttas, so they're a bit stylized and can feel a bit remote or not that connected to real life. But I would say they absolutely are, if we apply them. If they're like the medicine that we need to free the heart from its false limitations, to free the heart from its unnecessary burdens, to bring true freedom, true peace, and true ease. And it's up to us to take the medicine. It's up to us individually to apply those principles moment by moment, day after day. And when we do, then the medicine works. the Buddha is the doctor of the world. The medicine is effective if we take it. If it just sits in a bottle on the shelf, then it's not going to be much use to us. But if we apply these teachings and the flow of feelings, sadness and loss, excitement and pleasure, comfort, discomfort, the whole array of different feelings that we experience, no matter how strongly our name, our identity is woven into those feelings, if these principles are applied, every feeling, every pattern in the field of our experience will lead to the realization of Nibbana, if we let it. Ewan. So I offer these thoughts for consideration this evening.